Hi, Mo. You've done it yet again. I've got my hands in flour and butter, and I'm making pastry. I'm making pastry for mince pies again. I like mince pies, so I eat them. What you need for mince pies is some butter and some flour and a jar of mincemeat, a bit of water, a bit of milk. But see, my grandfather was actually a pastry chef, and so my mother taught me how to make pastry. If I cook, what were you calling about?
I want to talk about the next set of study units really, and I want to ask you about what's going on with corporate strategy.
This is quite a shift actually from our previous study units. So remember, right at the beginning we talked about how there's these two big questions in strategy that all the academics argue about. And the first one we said was about, well, what is the source of sustainable competitive advantage? And that's what we've been covering up to now, you know, these different perspectives. But that second question about, well, what exactly is the responsibility of the firm? So these next two study units look at that question. So from a different perspective. This week, taking that perspective for corporate strategy, and then in the following session, we'll be looking at it in terms of corporate social responsibility. Now, underpinning those two perspectives is a long-running debate between what you could call the shareholder perspective on the responsibility of the firm and the stakeholder perspective on the responsibility of the firm. Now, the shareholder perspective is the one that sort of dominated through from probably the 1970s, certainly the 1980s, through to probably the 2000s. Although recently there has been, probably through the 2000s into the 2010s, the stakeholder perspective has come to the fore. Now, put them simply, the shareholder perspective, particularly based on the work or thinking of Milton Friedman, I'm sure everyone's heard of him, but Friedman captured this view in the statement that the social responsibility of business is business. So what he's saying in that is the business focuses on doing what it's supposed to do. So making products and services for its customers, living within the laws of the land, that's important. So it's not about being sort of doing illegal stuff, it's still, you've got to stay within the law. And as part of that, very important, paying taxes and paying dividends and giving value to the owners of the firm, the shareholders. That's the idea. Now, on the surface, that seems, oh, that's just firm for itself. But actually, what Friedman is saying there is that firms are playing a prescribed role in society. So what he's saying is that you need to segment up what the different institutions in society do and then focus each on the role they're good at. So what we're saying here is not that you ignore what society needs and the whole idea of social value. What you're saying is that aspect of life is delivered by other institutions, by government, by charities and the like. Now, to make that work, they need funding for that. Well, the only way you get funding for that for a government is through taxes. So you want the institutions like firms to focus on doing well. And so by being narrow in their outlook and focusing just on business, they are better at producing better products for society and hopefully will make more profits and therefore pay more dividends and taxes, and that then funds the activities of the shareholders themselves to indulge in philanthropy or giving money to charity, or for government to, through taxes, to actually deliver those other aspects of society. So that's the shareholder perspective. So it's not saying that society is bad, it's saying that firms have this role to play in making society work, and they do that best by focusing on what they're supposed to do. In contrast to that, and particularly sort of it's linked into the work of, and this is often confusing, but a guy called Freeman, so you've got the two F's going on here, but Freeman, coming from a very US Anglo-Saxon model of capitalism, says no, actually firms have a wider role to play in the social activities in a society, so delivering social value. And so firms need to think beyond what they're legally required to do and what they have to do to deliver their products and services. They have a responsibility to voluntarily, that's important, so this is going beyond what they're compelled to do, to deliver social value. So get involved in providing funding to social initiatives, to supporting charitable activities, and making decisions which are not only good for their owners and shareholders, but also are good for the other stakeholders in the firm. And by that, it means for its employees, for its suppliers, for its community in which it operates in, and within the wider society in which it operates in. So, a view that you need to think about doing social activities beyond what you would need to do just to stay in business. And so there's this argument that has gone on about, well, what is the right view on this? And there's rights and wrongs on both sides of that argument. But as we have done all the way through the module, as practitioners, the best thing to do there is to say, okay, I know there are disagreements, but if I adopt the different perspectives, does that mean I get a better insight on the decisions I need to make? So what we need to do as strategists, as managers, is look at issues from the perspective of the shareholder perspective. Now, what does it tell me? If I look at this issue just from the interests of the owners, what does that tell me? And then go and look at it from the stakeholder perspective. Now, next study unit, we will take that stakeholder perspective, and that leads us into the whole world of corporate social responsibility. And a particular model developed by our friend Michael Porter, working with a guy called Kramer, that allows us to think about which corporate social responsibility activities we should engage in. This study unit, though, we're going to take the shareholder perspective, and that leads us into the world of corporate strategy. Because corporate strategy is very much to do with that interaction, that interface between the firm and its owners and its shareholders. And what is it, their requirements, what does that mean for us as a business, and the decisions we make as a business about things like the scope of the firm and how the firm adds value. How does it add shareholder value? That scope question is very important, because in a modern market, a developed capital market, then of course shareholders have the option of directly investing into different firms. And so that plays out in terms of, firstly, well, should the firm, if it's in a single market, say, so a single product firm, should it continue to hold on to shareholders' capital? Yeah, perhaps if you, like last week, if you were a shareholder in Blockbuster, as the activist shareholder was looking at, is the best use of their capital to keep it in Blockbuster, or to they themselves go and invest into Netflix, because they're perfectly capable of doing that. And so a view there would say, well, no, Blockbuster, don't go chasing the streaming market. Now, we're perfectly capable of getting the value out of the streaming market by making a direct investment into Netflix. What you should be doing is managing that current business model, even though it's declining, and focusing on doing that. And as it shrinks, then give us our capital back. So that would be from the perspective of just the shareholders' interest. Now it gets really interesting in what you could call group companies. So these are companies that are diversified beyond a single business unit. So have either horizontally diversified, so this is where you're operating across multiple markets, multiple product lines. So if you do you remember the car company Saab?
Yeah.
Yeah. So they don't just make cars; they make trucks. They also make fighter aircraft. We used to make fighter aircraft as well. So they're very highly diversified across a range of product lines that probably didn't make too much sense. The synergies between fighter aircrafts and family cars are not great. So was it in shareholders' best interest for Saab to be operating in those different areas as a single entity?
I gotta take this from the top, man. You said a lot. I need to consume this while you're making a mince pie here. So you said what you said in terms of corporate strategy, which is quite interesting, is this idea of scope, and where it means, well, where does a business add value? And you actually then started talking about, imagine in a modern economy where a company would have perhaps business units or own a number of other businesses, in which the center, I guess, would be able to decide what type of different business it could use to its own advantage, I guess, and you used the word synergies. You said
Synergy, yeah.
Yeah. So what do you mean by that? Let's explain to us.
Okay, synergy is that by doing two things together, it adds more value.
The idea of corporate strategy as a center is you're thinking, okay, you have, say, I don't know, let's just pick a number, 10 companies that this corporation owns. So you're actively looking and going, okay, company A is good at this. Let's make that, let's give it to company, B or C, and get them to work together. So that as a group, as a portfolio, I guess, of companies, they're better off as a group than instead of being individual standalone businesses. And actually the center.
So the center, so being together, they are more effective than if they were separate. And of course, remember that shareholders do have that choice that they could invest in those companies separately. So it's not just the case of each of those business units is profitable. By doing stuff, it's producing profits and paying dividends, because shareholders can get that value anyway by just directly owning them. And the problem with a group business is that headquarters, and all those group processes and the like, that costs money. And of course, the group headquarters is not actually selling anything.
Yeah, he's not actually making money out of himself. Yeah.
It's relying on those business units to create the money. And so, left to its own devices, unless you have that synergy going on, unless you have that value being created by putting those business units together, just owning a company is a cost.
Yes.
And shareholders wouldn't have that cost if they owned those separate businesses
The whole corporation, I just invest in business A.
Yeah, exactly. Why incur that cost? It's destroying. So it's destroying shareholder value.
So there's a real interest in the corporation demonstrating the rationale for having such a number of corporations underneath it. Yeah, and you said that something about groups of companies can be horizontally aligned, and were you going to say vertical as well, or just horizontal?
Yeah, so horizontally diversified.
Yeah.
Right, then that's a reflection of the scope of the business.
Okay.
So, and that could be horizontal, i.e. it's the breadth of markets the firm operates in. Now, of course, the argument would go, the further away that you get from the core of the business, so in Saab's case, making different models of car, still a degree of horizontal diversification, but there's probably good synergies amongst those. The further you stretch away from that, so to trucks, to fighter aircrafts, the less likely you are going to get synergies across the piece. And so for a shareholder perspective, just a shareholder perspective, remember, it raises questions about, well, should that group own those business units that in that case were producing fighter aircraft? Or would it be better for the group to have divested itself of that business unit, either so floated it directly to shareholders, so the fighter aircraft business becomes a separate company, or sold that business to maybe to Boeing or to Airbus, who do make aircraft, and therefore there'd be synergies to be exploited with that as a parent. And so that's the question that you're exploring.
Really interesting. So do we have a model for the shareholder perspective for the corporate strategy?
Yeah, so there's two bits of theory that you need here when you're thinking about diversification. So firstly, there's our friend who crops up everywhere.
Porter?
And you'll see him comes in next week as well. He comes up with his 3 tests of diversification. So, will a diversification move add shareholder value? So these 3 tests, and I'm sure you're going to laugh at the first one of these.
Go on.
Okay, so this works easiest to understand if you are talking about an acquisition, but it's just as true if you're developing a new product line or business yourself. So his first test is market attractiveness test.
I'm not going to say.
You're impressed by that one, aren't you?
Right, so.
He does. I must admit, he does get better as you go on to the other tests, but that's really insightful. But guess what he says you should use for the market attractiveness test?
His 5 forces.
Yes.
Oh my goodness, this guy is insufferable. Mike, come with something else. But the problem with these bits of theory is that they stood the test of time, don't they? So, anyways, let's quickly move on because I'm getting a bad sense about this one.
So that's his first. That's his first test. His second test is all about synergies. So cost of entry test. So this is a straight financial valuation of the cost is going to be to either buy that firm or to develop that new market yourself compared to the value you'll be able to create by doing it. So this is when you see a mergers and acquisition going on. So for example, when I was in Aviva and we were doing the RSC acquisition, the market capitalisation of RSC was at one level, but to persuade the current shareholders of they wanted to sell, we had to offer a bid premium over the top of that. So to persuade them to sell, and the current management team will always argue, well, they can add more value in the future, which shareholders will get. Plus, you're probably in competition with others to buy that firm, so it's a bit of a bidding war going on here. And so you end up paying a premium above the market capitalisation price of what you're trying to buy, trying to acquire. Okay, now that premium you justify by the synergies you believe you can create by your ownership of that firm. And you hope, in the negotiation, what you're trying to do is make sure you don't pay all those synergies away in what you pay for it. So your shareholders are going to gain out of letting you use that capital to buy that other firm, or supplying that capital to buy that firm. So that's the cost of entry test. So now it's amazing how many M&A deals end up where that doesn't happen. Because managers get deal fever. So the competition to acquire this firm means all sorts of promises are made about synergies. Well, we'll get this growth and like these cost savings and all the rest of it. And then when you've actually got the business, you either haven't done your due diligence correctly, or people were so caught up in the bid process that they were making unrealistic claims. And so this is why so many M&A deals actually are bad for shareholders. So that's the second test. So it's an attractive market, we go into that one. Yeah, we can enter it and still make value for our shareholders after entry. And then the third test is the better off test. Now this is important, and probably the most important one of them, because it's the one that's least thought about. And this is saying, this links back to what we were saying before about ownership incurring a cost. Okay?
Ownership incurring a cost.
Well, we talked about that earlier, about the fact that by owning something, you're putting costs into the thing. What you could do, so you've made that attractive entry into it, you've got those quick win synergies. Well, you could say, right, we'll now sell that business and realise all those gains. The shareholders get the value you've created. And that, for a shareholder, if you're just going to incur cost, would be the right move. So to keep that business, keep owning that business, you've got to keep showing you can go on creating more value. So it's not that the business you've acquired is generating value. Remember, the shareholders can get that anyway. It's you as a group, as the headquarters, can keep adding value to that business beyond what you've already created. Because as soon as you've run out of potential value you can add, best move for shareholders would be, sell it, let's realise those gains you've made. So it's better off, it continues to be better off under your ownership than under someone else's ownership, or if you sold it. So this is the big question in corporate strategy. Keep asking, are those subsidiary units, those strategic business units, can we continue to add more value to them as a group, or should we now sell them? So that's Porter's 3 tests.
Well, let me expand it as you said. So Porter's got this test for diversification, mainly about acquisitions, but we can apply it, he said, elsewhere. And three key tests. Number one, market attractiveness. Number two, the cost of entry. And number three, the better off test. In terms of market attraction, talking about what Fortified Forces, is it an attractive thing to own? Secondly, the cost of entry. It is, well, actually, can we actually get synergies out of it? Because you said it's quite nuanced because you end up paying a synergy for it, right? You actually end up paying for it. And then the better off is actually, once they're in the system, is it profitable that we can keep improving it because they're with us? If not, if it from a shareholder's perspective actually makes more sense to just realize that profit and move it on, as it were.
Yeah.
So that's some three key tests, and I think all of them is quite important because it's all from a shareholder's perspective. It's all about giving more value to the owners of this corporation.
Absolutely. That's the perspective we're using here. We're going to take the different perspectives next week, but to get the inside of that, we're sticking with what shareholders want at this point in time.
Okay.
So I'm with you. You said there's another bit of theory that we need to.
Okay, so to delve more into this better off test, we can then use another framework which is called the parenting matrix.
I was about to say port or something. Like, oh my goodness.
This one surprisingly wasn't Porter. This was some academics called Campbell, Gould and Alexander, and they're at Ashridge Business School. Now what they said through their research is they were looking at the factors that would allow firms to add value to a subsidiary, but equally the other way around would destroy value in a subsidiary. And they said there were two dimensions to that. And one of them we've already talked about. It was the potential for the group to add more value. So not what we've done already. Going forward, is there more ways we can add value to this? Okay? And then the second dimension is what is the feel the group has for that subsidiary business? What's the fit between the way in which the group operates and behaves and the controls and processes it puts in, which it obviously mandates onto its subsidiaries, and what's good for those businesses? Now if you imagine, a good example here, you're a large manufacturer of heavy engineering. Okay, you will have a certain, your history has been in that space. Do you remember we talked about dominant paradigms, dominant designs? Over history, path dependency, that is built up, so you do business in that industry in a certain way. The way in which you then manage subsidiary businesses will reflect that way of working. Now imagine if you owned an app company, which is entrepreneurial, free-spirited, latest engineering craze, things change every weekly, not even yearly. Can you imagine the misfit between that heavy engineering parent and that app company? But the group is dictating what they do. And as it doesn't fit, it's going to destroy value in that subsidiary. It's not, it's putting them at a disadvantage against their competitors. So in that case, by there not being a fit, you're destroying value. So what Campbell, Gould and Alexander in their parenting matrix say is that you can use those two dimensions as two axes on a graph. So, surprisingly for strategists, it's not a 2 by 2.
2 by 2.
It's not a 2 by 2. Because one of the boxes is not a box. As you'll see from the slides on this, one of them is an odd-shaped box. But it's sort of a bit like a 2 by 2. So you put on the horizontal axis this potential to add more value, and then you put on the vertical axis the level of fit or feel. At the top, good fit and feel. At the bottom, poor fit and feel. And that then defines these 4 areas. And so top right is what's called heartland. This is the odd shaped box.
Top right, yeah.
Top right, so this is the
right is the
first, the group has lots more opportunity to add more value, so the potential to add value is there. Plus there's a very good feel in the group for that subsidiary. So it can add value and it fits. So that's your heartland, that's the future of the group. Now you're adding shareholder value by your ownership. Okay, tick, great.
Tick, double tick.
Right, so come across to the top left. Now here again, the fit and feel. The fit and feel is good.
It's a good fit.
Yeah, but you've not got potential to add more value to it. Now maybe in the past you may have added a lot of value, but you've run out of potential value you can add. Now that area is called ballast. And here you have a ballast. This is where you've got a question as a group. Now, either it's now time to sell that business because you're adding cost, or maybe you might decide, well, we're going to really reduce the control of that business and to just run it with a light touch and just take the profits out of it because we can get something from it. And so you've got to make a choice, the management team, which of those you do. Moving down to the bottom left. So this is, you've got no potential to add value, you've got no fit or feel for it. So, you know, not only do you not add value to the future, you're destroying value today. So you should sell that business or get out of it because all you're doing is incurring cost. So you're destroying shareholder value in that space.
And then, name for it, that area?
Yeah, so that area is called alien territory. Well, it is alien. You haven't got a clue as a management team how to run those businesses. You know, this is like the heavy engineering company running that app. And shareholders, quite rightly, will be saying, what are you doing? Shareholders could do a better job of managing, owning that business directly, or there's another parent who would be a better home for that subsidiary. And then the fourth, the final area, bottom right. So here you've got a huge amount of potential to add value, but your fit and feel is very low.
So the potential is great, but they just don't fit well with the rest of your portfolio.
Exactly. They call this. You call this value trap. Now you got 2 choices here. Well, you could just sell it, because actually you're going to destroy it, because you're fit or feel, you're never going to realise that potential value. Yeah. Or you have to move the approach of the group, the fit of the group, you have to move that more into alignment with that business. Now that brings a risk, because by moving the group into alignment with that business, potentially you move out of fit with those heartland businesses that are top right. And so you've got to be very careful in that space what you do.
So, when you're going through this, were you thinking of it in these terms?
Yes.
This is trap, this is heartland, this is alien territory, this is ballast. Were those terminologies that you actually use?
Example could be, let's go back to that Aviva example. After the merger between Commercial Union, Generac and Norwich Union that created Aviva, we were looking at insurance diversification in this same way. And actually after the merger pulled out of certain areas in insurance because we felt it didn't actually fit our heartland. And then so when we were into buying IC, the same thinking was going on. So very much looking at it from this perspective, but of course also thinking, well, are there other reasons why we should keep particular businesses rather than just the model? These models are great to provide insight and raise questions, but it's not a automatic telling you what to do. As a manager, you still have to make a choice.
Yeah, but I can see straight away how useful it is just to be able to understand what your value proposition is for your group and go, okay, well, actually, we're more this than that. And it can actually help you try to understand whether or not you should make the acquisition
Yeah, and then you have to keep on doing that analysis.
And then that's what I've noticed because the alien territory is what maybe a particular business unit has reached its lifespan with you, and then you have to make the decision to actually this particular unit no longer fits with everything else we're doing, and hence we have to sort of and it's again it comes back to the shareholder perspective. It's always about making sure that at the end of the financial year the shareholder gets as much value from what its ownership is, and it's come back down to that with little regard for anything else really. It's all about making sure that
Well, it's not just the shareholder, but you as a business are operating at your most effective, and therefore, from a societal level, you are paying the most effective amount of tax. There you go.
Quality.
4 for me, 2 for you. Is that the ratio?